The text messages blinked on Susan's phone, open on the kitchen counter for anyone to see. Todd Peterson and a string of explicit details, then the condom wrappers in her purse. My chest tightened. I stood there, rooted, exposed. She walked in, saw my face, then the phone. Her gaze flickered to the evidence, then back to me. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching her lips. The text messages had been the first piece of evidence. Digital proof displayed without intent. A string of dates and times, direct quotes, and the name Todd Peterson illuminated on the screen. My initial reaction was a cold, systematic review. I recognized Todd, an accountant from Susan's office. The conversation history was not ambiguous. Below the phone, tucked haphazardly into her open handbag on the countertop, were 2 foil packets. Unused. The brand was unfamiliar to our bedroom. It was a clear, physical confirmation. Susan walked in then, returning from a grocery run, her keys still in hand. She saw the phone in my grip, then my face, then the open purse. Her expression shifted, a slight hardening around her mouth. She didn't deny it. "He's been good to me," she said, her voice flat, as if discussing a recent purchase. "Todd. We've been together for 6 months." 6 months. The precision of the timeline struck me. It wasn't a sudden lapse. I felt a cold disconnect, observing the situation as if from a distance. The details formed a complete picture. I arranged an immediate meeting with Michael Vance, a family law attorney I'd found through a former colleague. His office was sterile, smelling faintly of old paper and disinfectant. I laid out the facts, presenting them chronologically, without embellishment. Susan's confession, the texts, the condoms. Vance listened, making notes, his expression unreadable. "Texas law is not favorable to men in these cases, Frank," he began, leaning back in his chair. "Especially regarding custody. Judges often lean toward the mother as the primary caregiver. Community property rules mean everything acquired during the marriage is split 50/50. Your pension, her pension, the house, the savings, everything." He explained the potential for disproportionate division if infidelity was proven, but also cautioned about the subjective nature of such claims. The affair itself, while a factor, often doesn't swing asset division enough to warrant the cost of proving it conclusively in court. And custody? That's rarely impacted by infidelity alone, unless there's an allegation of endangerment to the children. The reality hit with the force of a physical blow. I stood to lose the house, a significant portion of my retirement, and, most damningly, primary custody of Amy and Chloe. The thought of not having them every day, of seeing their lives from a distance, was a cold dread that settled deep in my chest. Vance added another layer of complexity. "Do not, under any circumstances, try to remove her from the house. Even if you own it pre-marriage, it creates a hostile environment claim. You'd be looking at a restraining order against you, and potentially immediate temporary orders awarding her possession of the home and temporary custody." I sat in his office, weighing the logical options. "Cheaper to keep her" was a phrase that came to mind, a brutal economic calculus. Stay in a dead marriage, preserve my assets, maintain daily access to my daughters. But the image of Susan, her casual confession, the knowledge of Todd, made that option a bitter pill. Leaving the meeting, the world felt sharper, colors more defined, sounds amplified. The data was clear. I needed to act. But the decision was not about finances. It was about Amy and Chloe. Living without them was not an option I could process. That evening, I approached Susan in the living room, where she was flipping through channels. "We need to talk," I stated, my voice even controlled. I had rehearsed it. "About our marriage. About Todd." She sighed, a small, put-upon sound. "Frank? Really? It's not that big a deal. You've been so distant. I had needs. Needs you weren't meeting. Her words carried an undercurrent of accusation, shifting the blame. It wasn't an apology. It was a rationalization. A 7-year marriage. 2 daughters. You categorize this as not a big deal? My voice tightened, a slight tremor I tried to suppress. What about our commitment? What about trust? People change, Frank, she said, shrugging, her eyes still on the screen. And you weren't there. Not for a while. The dismissal fueled a quiet anger that began to simmer beneath my composed exterior. I've been working, providing, raising our children. What exactly was I supposed to be doing? The argument escalated, a flurry of accusations and counter-accusations, each word a further brick in the wall between us. It concluded with her stepping closer, placing a hand on my arm, a sudden, unexpected attempt at physical intimacy. Come on, Frank, we can fix this, can't we? I flinched away from her touch, a visceral reaction. The idea of intimacy with her, with Todd Peterson's shadow hanging over us, was repellent. No, I said, my voice barely a whisper, filled with a conviction that surprised even me. I turned and walked toward the basement door, needing distance, needing silence, needing to process. I opened the door, descended the creaking steps to my office, and closed it with a deliberate, echoing slam. The following Saturday morning, after Susan left for her usual brunch with her friends, I began the task. It was not done in a fit of anger, but with methodical precision. I went into our bedroom, opened her side of the closet, and systematically removed her clothes, folded them, and placed them into plastic storage bins. Her shoes, her toiletries from the bathroom, the books on her nightstand, all were packed with a deliberate, almost clinical detachment. The marital bed, a king-sized memory foam, felt larger already. Each item represented a choice, a past. I carried the bins downstairs to the guest bedroom in the basement, a room we used only a few times a year for visiting relatives. It had its own bathroom, a small window looking out onto the backyard. It was a self-contained space. She returned later that afternoon. The silence in the house must have been immediate, different from the usual weekend quiet. I heard her climb the stairs to our bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard the sharp intake of her breath, then the descent of her footsteps. Faster this time. She stood at the entrance to my basement office, her face flushed. My things, Frank, she began, her voice tight, barely controlled. They're down here. What is this? I looked up from the spreadsheet I was reviewing. Yes, Susan, I replied, my voice calm, neutral. They are. I believe separate sleeping arrangements are necessary now. Given the circumstances, I didn't elaborate. The facts were self-evident. She stared at me, her chest heaving slightly, then turned and walked away. The house, from that moment, became a different entity. It was larger, colder. The air between us was thick, an unspoken agreement of absence. We navigated around each other, a choreography of avoidance. Meals were eaten in silence. The sound of cutlery against ceramic was amplified. My interactions were solely directed toward Amy and Chloe, ensuring their routines were undisturbed. One evening, about a week after the shift, I walked into the kitchen to find the scent of roasted chicken and garlic potatoes. It was my favorite meal. Susan was at the stove, stirring a pan of green beans. She looked up, a small, tentative smile on her face. Dinner's ready, she said, her voice softer than it had been in days. We sat at the dining table, the girls chattering about their day at school. I responded to their questions, asked them about their homework, a careful normalcy maintained for their benefit. Susan occasionally interjected, asking Amy about her art class, Chloe about her new book. But when her gaze drifted to me, I kept my focus on my plate, or on the girls, offering nothing. No eye contact, no acknowledging her attempt to bridge the chasm. I ate the chicken, tasting the familiar flavors, but felt nothing. The food might as well have been rationed sustenance. After dinner, I helped the girls with their homework, read them stories, tucked them into bed, just as I always had. It was the one part of my day that remained untouched by the marital decay. Their small, trusting faces were a necessary anchor. When I finally went to bed, I found Susan already there, on her side of the king. She shifted as I lay down, then subtly moved closer, her back pressing against mine. I felt her arm reach back, attempting to loop around my waist. I stiffened. Then, with a deliberate, almost imperceptible movement, I pulled away, creating space. I reached for the spare duvet I had placed at the foot of the bed, and unfolded it, laying it carefully between us, not as a wall, but as a boundary. A clear, physical demarcation. She didn't speak, but I felt her withdraw, her body rigid. This pattern became our new normal. Weeks bled into one another, marked by the glacial silence and the persistent, physical distance. Conversations were functional, transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? The girls need new shoes. Nothing more. She would sometimes observe me from across the room, her gaze lingering. I noticed she started watching me during my early morning runs. The running had become a necessity. I woke before dawn, dressed in the dark, and slipped out of the house, the cool Midwestern air, a sharp contrast to the stale silence within. I started with 5 miles, then 7, then 10. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement, the burning in my lungs, the sweat stinging my eyes, it was a release. A way to channel the anger, the frustration, the pervasive sense of betrayal that simmered beneath my carefully controlled exterior. I pushed my body, turning emotional turmoil into physical exertion. My muscles hardened, my stamina increased. I was fitter than I had been in years, but the physical improvements didn't translate into emotional peace. The quiet fury remained, a constant companion. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with one of her friends. Her voice was low, but I caught snippets. Just needs time. He'll come around. Her words were delivered with a casual certainty, as if my current state was merely a temporary aberration, a phase I would eventually snap out of. The thought added another layer of frustration. She didn't see the finality of it, the logical conclusion I had already reached. She saw a pause, not an end. The idea had been forming in my mind for weeks, a logical solution to the custody dilemma. If Texas law favored Susan, I needed to create an environment where my daughters would choose me. I began researching RVs. My vision was clear: a mobile base for adventures, a way to build memories with Amy and Chloe that Susan would either join or miss entirely. I brought it up to Susan one evening, as we sat in the living room, separated by the invisible barrier that had become standard. "I'm thinking about getting an RV," I stated, watching her reaction, "for camping trips with the girls. They've always talked about seeing more of the country." She gave me a skeptical look. "An RV? Frank, that's a huge expense." "And for what? You've never been much of a camper." "It's about the girls," I countered, keeping my tone even. "Quality time, away from screens, out in nature." I didn't mention the underlying strategy, the deliberate wedge I intended to drive. The following weekend, I took Amy and Chloe to a large RV show held at the convention center. Their eyes widened at the sight of the gleaming vehicles, the promise of adventure. They climbed into different models, exploring the bunk beds, imagining campfires and s'mores. "Dad, can we really get one?" Amy asked, her voice filled with genuine excitement. Chloe, usually more reserved, nodded enthusiastically. Their reaction solidified my decision. This wasn't just a strategy, it was an investment in their happiness, and indirectly, in my future with them. Over the next few weeks, I delved into online forums, watched YouTube reviews, and visited several dealerships. I settled on a used Grand Design Transcend Explorer 265 BH. It was a travel trailer, not a motorhome, which meant I'd need a truck to pull it. The 265 model had a dedicated bunkhouse for the girls, a comfortable queen bed for me, and a decent kitchen. It felt practical, well designed for family use. The price was reasonable for its condition. Then came the truck. I needed something capable of towing a 7,000-pound trailer comfortably and safely. I found a used GMC 2000 500 HD crew cab Denali. It was a beast of a vehicle, powerful and reliable, with enough room for the girls and all our gear. The total investment, including the trailer and the truck, came to approximately $80,000. It was a significant sum, but I saw it as a necessary expenditure, a long-term play. My plan was simple. Start taking the girls on weekend trips, then longer ones during school breaks. Create experiences that were unique, engaging, and directly tied to me. Susan would see the photos, hear the stories. The choice would be clear. Be part of these new family memories, or be left out. I wasn't just buying an RV. I was buying leverage. Susan, meanwhile, discussed the matter with Todd Peterson. She called him one evening, her voice sharp with indignation. He bought an RV, Todd, and a huge truck to go with it. $80,000. He's trying to punish me. Todd, from what I could gather later, listened patiently. Punish you, Susan? He asked. His voice calm, pragmatic. Is that what you think this is? Of course. It's an extravagant waste. He's never been this spontaneous. He knows I hate camping. Susan, Todd pressed, his tone shifting. You told me Frank was fine with us, that you had an agreement. There was a pause. I imagined her fiddling with something, her eyes darting around the room, trying to find an escape from the direct question. Well, not exactly an agreement, she admitted, her voice lower. He found out. Text messages, condom wrappers. It was not an agreement. Todd was silent for a moment. So he didn't give you permission. He discovered you cheating. And now he's trying to build a life with his daughters. A life that doesn't necessarily include you. His words were clinical, cutting through her narrative. Susan, you should be trying to fix things with Frank. Not complaining about him making plans with his kids. You're losing your family, your life. I heard the shift in her tone after that conversation. A new uncertainty. A faint hint of desperation. She started observing me more closely, not just with resentment, but with a calculating gaze. Todd's advice had resonated. She was beginning to understand the depth of her predicament, the potential consequences. The RV wasn't just a vehicle for camping. It was a symbol of a future she might not be a part of, and the realization seemed to have dawned that if she wanted to be in that future, she might have to fight for it, on my terms. The first major trip with the RV was planned for a week-long journey to the Carolinas. I spent the days leading up to it meticulously packing, checking the truck, and ensuring the trailer was road-ready. I didn't explicitly invite Susan, nor did I explicitly exclude her. The expectation hung in the air. She wouldn't come. She made no overtures to join, no offers to help pack. Her absence was a given. Amy and Chloe were ecstatic. The drive was long but filled with games, stories, and their shared anticipation. We camped in state parks, hiked trails, skipped rocks in rivers, and cooked over campfires. The girls thrived. They laughed more freely, their faces lit by the glow of the fire, their small hands sticky with s'mores. I watched them, observing their reactions. Susan's name rarely came up, a passing comment, a quick "mom would like this." Then they moved on. It was a stark realization. Her absence, while noted, did not diminish their enjoyment of the experience. It was a quiet affirmation of my strategy. Back home, Susan had experienced her own form of reality check. She realized she had missed a week of her daughters' lives. The quiet house, the absence of their laughter, the photographs I later showed the girls. It was a void she had created. Days after we returned, a small, practical problem arose. She needed her briefcase for a crucial presentation at work. She searched her office, her car, her usual spots, then remembered. "My briefcase," she said, her voice strained. "I left it in your truck, Frank. Can you get it for me?" I had just finished unloading the last of the camping gear. The truck was still parked in the driveway. "Sure," I replied, grabbing the keys. I opened the back door, and there it was, tucked behind the passenger seat. An expensive leather case she rarely let out of her sight. I reached for it, and as I did, a small, laminated card slipped out from between the folds of a newspaper she had used to protect some documents. It was a hotel key card. The room number, 307, was clearly visible. Attached to the card, by a flimsy plastic loop, was a tiny, ornate key, not much larger than my thumbnail. It was unfamiliar. Definitely not for our house or car. A cold certainty settled in. I opened the briefcase. Inside, nestled beneath her work documents, I found receipts. Not just for coffee or office supplies, but for dinner at a high-end restaurant, a boutique clothing store, and then the hotel. The dates aligned perfectly with my first week-long camping trip. My stomach tightened. This was more than just the affair. This was an ongoing, planned deception. I picked up the small key, turning it over in my fingers. It looked like a key for a small lockbox, perhaps a safety deposit box. My mind raced, connecting the dots. She had never mentioned a safety deposit box. I knew our joint one, the bank, the box number. This was different. A new bank, a private one. The next day, under the pretense of a work errand, I visited several banks in neighboring towns, presenting the key. It took 3 attempts. At the 4th bank, a small, independent institution a good 20 miles from our home, the key fit. The clerk, after verifying the box number against the key, retrieved a small metal box. "It's a small one, sir. No joint signatory on this. Just the holder." He seemed confused that I, a man, was holding a key to a box, registered to Susan Miller. I didn't correct him, simply signed the log and took the box into a private viewing room. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue paper, were 2 things. First, a stack of crisp $100 bills, neatly banded. I estimated it to be well over $50,000. Second, a document, legal-sized, folded precisely. It was a will, not our joint will, which was years old, but a new one, dated 3 months prior. I scanned it quickly, my eyes moving over the legal jargon. It explicitly stated that in the event of Susan's death, all her assets, including her share of the community property, would pass directly to a trust established for Amy and Chloe, bypassing me entirely. It appointed her sister as the trustee, and specifically outlined that I, Frank, would receive only a token sum, not exceeding $1,000, in recognition of our dissolved marital union. It also heavily favored her sister for guardianship of the children, effectively minimizing my role even in that event. The coldness I had felt before was now a deep freeze, reaching into my bones. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a calculated, financial betrayal, a premeditated plan to strip me of everything. The affair was merely the symptom. The will, the cash, the hidden box. These were the true extent of her intention. The discovery of the hidden will and the cash was a pivot point. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was a calculated financial assault. My response needed to be equally calculated. The investigator in me took over. Detached and methodical. First, I ordered a small, discreet GPS tracker online. When it arrived, I waited until Susan was at work, then quickly installed it under her car's rear bumper. It was a simple magnetic attachment, easily hidden. Next, a tiny audio recorder, no larger than a thumb drive, was placed under the passenger seat, set to voice activation. For the house, miniature cameras, almost imperceptible, were strategically positioned in the living room and kitchen, common areas that would capture her interactions and movements without invading true privacy in private spaces like the bedroom or bathroom. The documentation began immediately. Every phone call I overheard, every expense I noticed on our joint credit card statements, every deviation from her usual routine, all were logged, dated, and cross-referenced. I created a spreadsheet, a timeline, a file that grew thicker each day. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicions about the joint accounts. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, always just under the threshold that would flag for an immediate bank inquiry. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The will had named a specific financial institution as the trustee for the girl's trust. This gave me a lead. I contacted a different attorney, a specialist in high-asset divorce cases, recommended by Michael Vance's colleague, but with a different specialty. This time, I didn't hold back. I laid out everything: the affair, the RV, the hidden briefcase, the hotel key, the cash, and the will. His name was Robert Jensen, a man known for his aggressive, detailed approach. "Frank," Jensen said after reviewing the copy of the will I'd made, "this isn't just about infidelity. This is an attempt to disenfranchise you entirely. The will, the hidden assets she's been preparing for a long time, possibly before the affair escalated." His words confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't a sudden impulse. It was a long-game strategy. With Jensen's guidance, I intensified my efforts. I began a full forensic accounting of our marital assets, going back several years. Every bank statement, every tax return, every investment portfolio was scrutinized. I compiled a comprehensive log of the financial discrepancies. The cash in the safety deposit box, coupled with the withdrawals from our joint accounts, was a clear indication of asset concealment. The GPS tracker and audio recorder provided invaluable data. Susan's movements became a predictable pattern. Work, then often a detour to a specific address before returning home. If you EVANTAs, that address belonged to Todd Peterson. The audio recordings, though sometimes muffled, captured snippets of conversations, confirming their continued intimacy, discussions about their future, and plans to manage their finances, including some veiled references to Frank's money. I even found evidence of her using our shared credit card to pay for dinner, sometimes even part of a hotel stay during her liaisons with Todd. It was all there, undeniable. I discovered other hidden assets: a small investment account in her maiden name, a collection of designer jewelry she had been quietly liquidating and storing the funds elsewhere, gifts to her sister that were far beyond reasonable. It was a network of deception, intricately woven into the fabric of our shared life. The woman I had married, with whom I had built a home and raised children, had been meticulously planning her exit, and mine, for years. The realization was a heavy one, but it sharpened my focus. There was no going back, no chance of reconciliation. This was no longer a personal affront. It was a legal battle for my future and my daughters. I continued preparing the detailed financial forensic report, a document that would serve as the backbone of my case. Outwardly, I maintained my composure. The icy silence, the emotional distance, it was all a mask. I kept my head down, my responses minimal, my routine unchanged. She continued to believe I was simply stewing, eventually coming around. She had no idea the extent of the investigation. The hidden wires, the cameras, the meticulously compiled evidence. She had no idea how thoroughly I was unraveling her carefully constructed web of lies. This was a game of chess, and I was several moves ahead, patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal my hand. You'll want to stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Robert Jensen, my new attorney, reviewed the compiled evidence: the will, the financial forensics report, the GPS logs, the audio recordings, the hotel receipts, the hidden cash. He leaned back, a grim satisfaction on his face. "Frank," he stated, "this is an exceptionally strong case. We have grounds for a fault divorce. a claim of asset dissipation, and significant leverage regarding custody. Your meticulousness has given us a very clear path forward. His counter-strategy was robust. We would file for divorce, not as a simple dissolution, but citing adultery and fraud as grounds. This would allow us to pursue a disproportionate division of assets in my favor and, critically, strengthen my position for primary custody. My immediate task was to secure my own financial standing. Jensen advised me to move my personal investment accounts, liquidate certain stocks I had held solely in my name, and transfer the funds to a new, separate account. It was a preemptive strike, legal and necessary. I also subtly began liquidating some joint assets that Susan had overlooked, or perhaps assumed I wouldn't touch: an old classic car, a small inherited parcel of land assets that, while joint, I had always managed. The funds were then moved into protected accounts, documented, ready to be presented as part of the asset pool but secured from her reach. We also moved to implement legal safeguards against further asset draining. A temporary restraining order on marital assets was filed with the court, preventing either party from selling, encumbering, or withdrawing significant funds without mutual consent or court order. This was a critical step, stopping Susan's pipeline of illicit transfers. Financial affidavits were prepared by independent forensic accountants, corroborating my findings of her fraudulent transfers and hidden accounts. Their expert testimony would be invaluable in court. Despite these legal maneuvers, the surveillance continued. I still needed to document any new instances of asset dissipation, any further evidence of her continued affair, or any actions that could be construed as neglect of the girls. The stronger the evidence, the more unassailable my position. Jensen and I met frequently, strategizing the timing of disclosures, practicing my demeanor under potential questioning. "You need to be calm, Frank," he advised. "Always factual. Let the evidence speak. Don't let her emotional responses provoke you." The primary goal remained the girls. Based on my comprehensive documentation, we began building a case for full custody, highlighting Susan's neglect, her frequent nights out, her lack of involvement in their schoolwork, her general disinterest in their daily lives, all meticulously logged against the backdrop of my consistent presence and engagement. The RV trips, the homework help, the bedtime stories, all were part of the evidence that painted a clear picture of who was the more involved parent. Every interaction with Susan became a potential piece of evidence. I made sure all communications were via text or email, leaving a paper trail. If she called, I'd follow up with a brief email summarizing the conversation, asking her to confirm. It was methodical, exhausting, but necessary. I anticipated her rage, her likely attempts to manipulate, to play the victim. I mentally rehearsed my responses. Calm, factual, referring to the evidence. Jensen confirmed the leverage I now held. The court will not look kindly on a spouse who has actively tried to hide assets and disinherit the other, especially when children are involved. This is not just about her affair, Frank. This is about calculated financial fraud. He explained that judges often view such actions as a severe breach of fiduciary duty within a marriage, reflecting negatively on her character and fitness as a parent. A quiet anticipation grew within me. The frustration that had gnawed at me for months began to give way to a cold, hard resolve. The groundwork was laid. The trap was set. My preparations were solid, comprehensive. All that remained was the execution. The time for revelation was approaching. The time had come to set the trap. Robert Jensen, at my instruction, formally requested a mandatory mediation session with Susan's legal representation. This was a standard procedural step in Texas divorce cases, so it wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. I chose the location carefully. A mediation office known to have discreet cameras in their private conference rooms, a detail Jensen confirmed. This would provide an official, legally admissible recording of her reactions, separate from my own home surveillance. For the same day, I coordinated with Jensen to have a private investigator, a former police detective named Markinson, on standby. Markinson would be positioned near Todd Peterson's apartment building, ready to document Susan's arrival and departure, confirming the physical act of the affair on the very day of the mediation. The preceding week, I had subtly laid the groundwork. I dropped a casual mention of a client dinner with an out-of-town contact, an event that would require me to be late and unavailable. This was a false lead, designed to provide Susan with the perfect window of opportunity. I could tell by her barely perceptible shift in posture that she was already planning. Later, I saw a text exchange with Todd, confirming a later-than-usual meeting on the designated day. My plan was taking shape. I ensured Amy and Chloe would be with Mrs. Henderson, their trusted babysitter, that evening. It was a regular arrangement, one that wouldn't alert Susan to anything out of the ordinary. The girls were happy with Mrs. Henderson, and critically, they would be far from the impending storm. The day before the mediation, I made a point of being overtly engaged with the girls. We went to the park, had ice cream, and spent the afternoon building a Lego castle. It was a calculated performance of domestic normalcy, designed to lower Susan's guard. I wanted her to feel secure, perhaps even a little pity for my supposed obliviousness. I wanted her to believe I was merely a distant, but present father. That evening, I sent her a short, almost perfunctory text. Running late tonight. Work meeting. Don't wait up. It was a green light, an invitation for her to proceed with her plans with Todd, precisely as I intended. The night before the confrontation, I double-checked everything. My hidden cameras in the house, the GPS tracker on her car, the audio recorder, all were fully charged and set to record. The home surveillance system was streaming directly to a secure server, time-stamped and encrypted. No detail was overlooked. I then briefed Markinson, the private investigator, giving him Susan's car description, Todd Peterson's address, and the expected time frame. Document everything, I told him. Photos, video, license plates. Don't engage, just observe and record. I spent the rest of the night reviewing my evidence timeline, a thick binder filled with printouts, receipts, and transcribed notes. The will, the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the audio snippets. It was all meticulously organized, color-coded, and cross-referenced. Each piece of paper was a nail in her coffin. My mind was clear, my resolve cold and unyielding. I anticipated Susan's reaction. The initial shock, the attempts to deny, to deflect, to play the victim. I knew she would try to undermine my credibility, but I had prepared for every contingency. Jensen was briefed as well. The moment we conclude the mediation, Frank, or as soon as she leaves, we're filing an amended petition for divorce. We'll include all the new evidence, specifically the findings from Markinson tonight. We'll request immediate temporary orders for sole management of community property and primary custody. She won't have time to react. A sense of controlled anticipation settled over me. There was no joy in this, no triumphant glee. Just a stark, logical progression of events. The chess pieces were in place. The move was imminent. Susan, oblivious to the meticulous preparations, followed the script I had laid out for her. She left the house shortly after my late work meeting text, heading straight for Todd Peterson's apartment complex. Markinson, the private investigator, was already in position. He documented her arrival, her entrance, and, 2 hours later, her departure. Photos and video, time-stamped and clear, confirming her physical presence and duration. From there, she drove directly to the designated hotel, the same one from the key card, where Todd was waiting. Markinson followed, capturing images of them entering the hotel together, and later, of them leaving. My attorney, Robert Jensen, and I arrived at the hotel parking lot minutes before their scheduled departure. I saw Susan's car, then Todd's. We waited. Soon, they emerged, talking closely, Todd's hand briefly touching Susan's arm. It was a casual intimacy. As they neared her car, I stepped forward, Jensen by my side. "Susan," I said, my voice cutting through the evening air, calm and clear. She froze, her head snapping up. Todd's eyes widened, recognizing me instantly. Frank? Her voice was a disbelieving whisper. I held up a stack of printed photographs. They were high resolution, taken just minutes before. Susan and Todd entering the hotel, leaving together. Her face in the photo was relaxed, smiling. Care to explain these? I asked, my voice devoid of inflection, her face drained of color. Frank, no. It's not what it looks like. We were just discussing work. Her gaze flickered to Todd, who had gone pale, silent. Jensen stepped forward, his expression formal. Susan Miller, he stated, his voice professional. You are hereby served with an amended petition for divorce. He handed her a thick sheaf of papers. Her hands trembled as she took them. This petition cites grounds of adultery and financial fraud. Then came the second blow. Jensen produced another document. This details the allegations of asset dissipation, including your systematic withdrawals from joint accounts, the existence of a hidden safety deposit box, and the fraudulent will you drafted to disinherit Mr. Miller. Susan's eyes darted from the papers to me, then back to Todd, who had started backing away slowly. You can't prove that, she stammered, her voice shaking. She fumbled for her phone, undoubtedly to call Todd, to coordinate a story. Todd's already aware, I stated, preempting her. Our private investigator notified him moments ago. He's probably already talking to his own attorney. I watched her face crumble further. And as for proof, I continued, stepping closer, my voice low. I know about the calls you made to him on Tuesday at 2:17 p.m., discussing the vacation funds. I know you stayed at room 307 here on the 14th, using our joint credit card for the dinner. I know about the $50,000 in the hidden box at First National. Her breath hitched. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. The realization of the depth of my surveillance hit her. She had thought she was safe, that her double life was hidden. Now, every lie, every secret, was laid bare. Frank, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. The girls. Think of Amy and Chloe. This will ruin them. She reached out, trying to touch my arm. I recoiled slightly, maintaining the physical distance. Amy and Chloe are precisely why I'm doing this. Susan, you systematically put their future, and mine, at risk with your calculated deception. I will be seeking full custody and a complete, equitable division of assets that accounts for your actions. My voice was flat, final. The carefully constructed facade of her double life collapsed entirely. She sagged, her shoulders slumping. Tears welled in her eyes, not of remorse, but of defeat, of being caught. Her carefully planned future, built on my unwitting contributions, had unraveled in a single, brutal confrontation. I watched her, detached, observing the complete breakdown of the woman I had once married. The cold, hard facts had done their work. The divorce proceedings were swift, almost clinically efficient. With my evidence, the will, the financial forensics, the surveillance, the private investigators' reports, Susan's defense crumbled. She had nothing. The court, presented with undeniable proof of her calculated fraud and consistent neglect, granted me full custody of Amy and Chloe. I retained the family home and was awarded a significant portion of the marital assets, accounting for her dissipation. Susan was left with minimal resources, her reputation irrevocably damaged, and her relationships fractured, even Todd Peterson having vanished from her life. He wanted no part of the fallout. I began rebuilding, brick by quiet brick. The house, once a silent battleground, became a home again. The RV became our sanctuary, a vehicle for new adventures. Amy and Chloe thrived, their laughter echoing in places it once couldn't. I watched them, their faces open, trusting, finally secure. The moral decay that had consumed Susan, leading to her calculated betrayal, had been met with a logical, unwavering response. I found a deep, abiding peace in the stability I had created, a quiet strength forged in the crucible of deceit. Our future was built on honesty, clear intentions, and the wide-open road.